Well, hello, everybody. My name is Bob Kasdan, and I am the president of the University of South Carolina here in Columbia, South Carolina. So we have this opportunity to have this conversation about leadership, and we're going to have the conversation here in South Carolina of the United States. As you can see on the title, this is going to be a conversation principally about leadership, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how West Point does that. And the reason I want to talk to you about how West Point handles leadership is principally because I was the president of West Point, the United States Military Academy, or another way to look at it, I was their superintendent. So welcome everybody, and thank you for being here for this conversation about leadership. Since I said it was about West Point, let me give you a little history about West Point. During the United States' Revolutionary War, when they were trying to separate as a colony from Great Britain, and England's strategy was to divide the colonies through the Hudson River. The Hudson River goes from northern New York all the way down to New York City. And the general in charge of the revolutionary forces realized that if that was the British strategy, he wanted to deny them access and navigation freedom along the river. So fortunately, he found this place where the river flows from the north to the south. It hits this huge rock bank on the side of the river, and the river goes for about a half a mile to the east, and then it starts going south again. And that place right there, as the phrase said, it was a place on the western bank. It was a point on the western bank. And because it was a point on the western bank, it got the name West Point. You can stand on there and look north up on the Hudson River, or you can look down on the Hudson River. It's very beautiful. But it was because of the Revolutionary War that they realized that was critical terrain, and they knew they had to secure it. So George Washington, the general at the time, decided to put his forces right there. When the Revolutionary War had ended, the fort stayed in place. And then, if you know anything about the United States history, the United States tried to start navigating to the west to open up the Western Corridor. And as a result of opening the Western Corridor, to put roads in place, to put railroad in place, they needed engineers. And up to that point, most of the engineers that had supported the United States and the colonies were from Europe, but West Point became the school for engineers so that engineers can facilitate the westward expansion. And then West Point remained in place. It not only created an army with engineers, it also created commanders of some of the different outposts of the United States as the United States expanded. The next big event that occurred in West Point's history was the Civil War in the middle of the 1800s, 1863, 4, 5, 6 time frame. And it was at that time where the South had separated from the North. And there were a number of West Point graduates who were leading the South, like Robert E. Lee, and there were a number of West Point graduates that were leading the North, like Ulysses Grant. And it was brother against brother, and it was a very ugly time in our history. But it was West Point that, for both sides of the war, provided the leadership, the military leadership for each one of them. West Point still remained in place as providing leaders during World War I and in World War II. And you might have heard of some of the leaders in World War II, which included MacArthur, who was a commander of all forces in the Pacific. And you might have heard about the commander in the European theater, Eisenhower. And General Eisenhower eventually became one of our presidents of the United States as well. General McChrystal, our great Special Forces commander, and the current Afghanistan commander, and even the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey, all distinguished West Point graduates that have led our military forces, our Army, and our nation in some very critical times. Okay, what I want to do on this class today and this course is to really, as I said, I want to talk about leadership. And I want to talk about leadership principally on how West Point develops leaders. What is their model? How do they grow leaders? What does their developmental model look like? How do they have practical experience? And then I want to talk about, after talking about how leaders are developed, I want to talk about what do I think are great attributes great characteristics within a leader. And then I want to give you some examples of that. We're going to bring it all together in the last part, that's part 3. And then throughout the lecture, I'll be able to ask you some questions, and I hope you have a chance to reflect on those questions as well.